Right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining and welcome to the Researcher Toolbox series. Our topic today is research funding. What can I learn from Scopus? The aim here is to familiarize you with funding information in Scopus, which derives from funding acknowledgements in the research papers. And what you can learn from them. So my name is Lucia Skumbi, and I'm the Senior Elsevier Consultant for Research Intelligence in Africa. I'm based in South Africa. My role is supporting our customers who use Scopus and SciVal, as well as some of the other solutions, funding, institutional, pure, etc. And my role today is to be the moderator. So with me or joining shortly will be somebody that you are familiar with, Dineshri Moodley. So she's also the customer consultant, but for core solutions, and she will be managing the questions and answers. We are also very pleased to welcome special guests today who will be our speakers. So firstly, there's Elena Zudolova-Seinstra. Sorry, Elena, I'm really messing up that pronunciation, but she's she's a senior product manager for Scopus at Elsevier. In her current role, she's responsible for document details and sources page. She joined Scopus team 2 months ago. So thank you very much. You are very new in the role to take on this task of presenting to us today. So, but she's been with Elsevier for a while, and she was managing data monitor and research elements program. And also before Elsevier, joining Elsevier 11 years ago, Elena worked at the University of Amsterdam, Sarah Computing Networking Services, and Corning Incorporated. She holds an MSc degree in technical engineering and a PhD degree in computer science. She's co-authored more than 60 research articles and book chapters. Welcome, Elena, and we look forward to your contribution. And then also joining today is Andrea Serban, and she's a group product manager contributing to building the knowledge graph of research as part of Elsevier's data platform. In her role, Andrea is responsible for creating a global database of research funding information to address the needs of researchers, institutions, and funders. Andrea also holds an MSc in computer science, and prior to joining Elsevier 8 years ago, she worked as a software engineer. We're really happy that you can join us today. Before I hand over to the both of them, I want to remind you about the upcoming sessions in this series. We have already covered SDGs and how to find them in Scopus. We also covered what you can do with policy documents, where to find them, what you can do, what is the significance thereof. And then next week on the 21st of April, we will be talking about Scopus as an accredited list. This will be mostly relevant for South African researchers, librarians, and research administrators, where Scopus has been selected as an accredited list, and it is used by the Department of Higher Education and Training to allocate subsidies to universities. So a very important session next week, and please join us for that. Before the last that I wanted to share with you is that to take note that all our presentations within the series, the recorded webinars and the presentations will be uploaded to our site. So I've given the URL here, but you can also find it in Google. If you Google Elsevier Scopus training and webinars, you'll get to this page. So we will also be sharing this with you via email. Right, so with that, I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to my colleagues, Elena and Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you very much for introductions, Lucia, and good afternoon, everybody. So our presentation today will be around 40 minutes, 40 to 50 minutes, and then at the end, we hope we'll have some time for Q&A. So before we start, can you please ask everybody to mute yourself, and also please add your question in the Q&A section so we could review it at the end. And obviously there's no recording today, but otherwise may be necessary. So Lucia has already introduced us. It's a joint presentation with Andrea. So Andrea, her team is responsible for the funding data that powers funding information in Scopus, and I'm from the product side, responsible indeed for the document details page, which presents a funding information, but also oversees some other functionality like expert. So the agenda for today will start with a quick introduction to Scopus. Then Andrea will explain you how the funding database works. And after that, I'll show you where you can find the information about funded research and how you can use it. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. So let's start with Scopus. First of all, I myself learned very recently that the world's largest abstract citation database of scientific literature, that its name actually comes from a little bird, which you can see on this screen. The name of this bird is Scopus calibitar, and the reason why this bird was selected to name our database is because it's a migrant bird with excellent navigation capabilities. And it resonates very well with the vision and mission of Scopus to help scientists all over the world to navigate in the world of scientific literature as easy as possible. So let's take a look at a little bit of numbers. Scopus is a source natural abstract and citation database, which is curated by independent subject matter experts. It covers 81 million items, including records from journals, books and book series, conference proceedings, and trade publication across 17 million author profiles and 80,000 institutional profiles. This delivers a comprehensive view of the world of research and has tools and functionality on top of this to support you to track, analyze, and visualize research data from 7,000 different publishers. All this come together and powers your research and help you to stay up to date with the current publications, analyze journals you want to publish in, track and monitor global trends, find collaborators, and much more. So the Scopus database is governed by an external and independent content selection and advisory board committee. So the CSAB committee comprises of 17 subject chairs, and those are experts all over the world, well-established researchers in the field. They were selected because of their knowledge. The committee meets several times per year, the last 2 years virtually, but we hope that will change and they will start meeting in person again. And during those meetings, they actually discuss the content and the curation. So they review around 3,000 titles per year, and about half of those titles will eventually get accepted. And just to give you a bit of perspective, roughly 10% of content in Scopus belongs to Elsevier. The rest comes from various different publishers. So, talking about Scopus vision, we see ourselves in helping the world of research make high-quality decisions with confidence. We recognize there are various changes that Scopus users are facing every day. First of all, our mission is to help conducting research, helping efficiently discover the most relevant research, but also helping in building collaborations, identifying the best experts to work with, evaluate impact, for instance, of research institution by looking at institutional profiles, or by demonstrating your own impact through the author profile, making research strategy decision based on analytical tools offered by Scopus, and last but not least, applying and analyzing funding. And our today's webinar is focused on this key research challenge. And with that, I would like to give floor to my colleague Andrea, and she will explain how the Elsevier funding database works. Andrea, floor is yours.
Thank you, Elena. Hi, everyone. As Lucia and also Elena mentioned, I'm Andrea, product manager with the funding domain, a data platform domain at Elsevier. Let me start by sharing with you what actually energizes me about my work at Elsevier. And this is our mission to help advance science. And we, in the funding domain, aim to support the research community with insights on research funding for decision-making and for more efficient workflow management and reporting processes. Researchers often mention that some of their main pain points actually are securing and reporting on funding. And I'm very happy to see how my work at Elsevier creates a positive impact on the researchers, but also on the research institutions and on the funders. Next slide, please. Today, I will be talking about Elsevier funding database, how and from where we collect the funding information, how we enrich it, and how we add additional value to this data, but also how this data is used in various products to support the needs I briefly mentioned about. I will then zoom in on Scopus to highlight what value we bring to the researchers and to the funders through the funding data present on scopus.com. So first of all, the purpose of our funding database is focusing on collecting information about research and innovation funding to make it more accessible, discoverable, and trackable. Elsevier has worldwide coverage of funders and their active and past funding, with a bit more focus on English-speaking countries. This is because our enrichment, our machine learning capabilities are more performant on English content, but we are continuously iterating and improving this. We capture data mainly from publicly available sources, so from our open sources, but also by working with funders. And when we talk about what type of funding data we cover in Elsevier, there are multiple types of data sets. Let me walk you through all of them. So first of all, it's about the funders. Elsevier creates and maintains a funder taxonomy of about 29,000 funders worldwide. And actually we make this taxonomy, we share it with Crossref. By sharing it with Crossref, we are helping researchers to link their publications with their funders. Next to the funder taxonomy, we are also collecting information about active calls or funding opportunities, as we call them, from a subset of these 29,000 funders. This information about funding opportunities is mainly available in Funding Institutional. Lucia mentioned about this product a bit earlier. Next to this, we are also collecting information about past awarded grants. I will be referring to this during the presentation as grants, awards, or awarded grants. And then more recently, we are focusing more and more on linking funding to outputs and outcomes. We already made a good progress on connecting funding with publications on Scopus, either by connecting the funder with those publications or when possible, going more granular and connecting the awards. In the future, we plan to expand to additional data sets, what we called outcomes of research, being it patents or clinical trials and so on. And we are continuously iterating and putting effort to improve the coverage and the quality of the funding data across all these entity types. Next slide, please. So how do we process this data? As I mentioned, we mostly work with publicly available sources or with the funders. But one of the main challenges when it comes to funding data is that there's no unified standard on how funders make their funding data available. So information comes in a variety of formats and data complexity, from very well-structured databases to HTML or even PDF files, containing very little detail or actually very granular information. And the first step we actually take is to standardize the data according to the Elsevier data model. The underlying model makes collected metadata comparable across geographies and across sectors, right? Because, I mean, a simple example, some funders will call it a title, some funders will call it a name, and so on. And then by using the Elsevier standard format, we are able to have, standardized way for funding data available worldwide. All this collected metadata is then stored in the Elsevier funding database, following the security guidelines, and also we are GDPR compliant. And on top of this data that we collect from funders, from the public sources, we will put additional value by enriching and linking this data. Couple of examples of additional enrichments we add on top of the collected data. We are extracting keywords, right? We are assigning classification categories to the funding data. We disambiguate the recipients, either the researchers or the institutions, and we are connecting them to the Scopus researcher profiles or with the Scopus affiliation profiles, and when possible, even with the external identifiers such ORCIDs for researchers. We also convert all this currency to a common, to a common currency, so we can compare across different geographies. Even more, we are extracting the funding information from publications available on Scopus to be able to link funding and outputs. Next slide, please. At the end of the day, what we aim to do in the funding domain is to contribute to the creation of the knowledge graph of research, focusing on the research funding space by collecting, curating, enriching, and linking all relevant entities to create value to the research community. And this is just an illustration on how data entities are linked to each other, starting from opportunity to funder, to awarded grant, to people, institutions, outputs, and outcomes. Next slide, please. We then make this curated, enriched, linked funding data available to the Elsevier ecosystem of products or even externally to other products. Recently, we see an increased interest from our users in having funding data to inform their decision-making. Last year, we launched new functionality in Scopus and in SciVal, the Elsevier analytical product, powered by funding data. We increased the number of funders available in Pure, the CRIS system, and we'll continue to iterate on this. And when it comes to the usage of funding data, so being it opportunities or awarded grants. Our aim is to have the data coverage as much as possible aligned across all Elsevier products, at least. But well, all these products are consuming the data from one single place, as you can see from the Elsevier funding database. Realistically, there will always be differences into how funders are available in each product and what funders are available in each product. And this is partly due to the availability of the metadata, partly due to the requirements of the products. To give an example, sometimes funders don't disclose the recipients of their funding, of their past funding. So then we won't be able to pre-fill this information on the Scopus researcher profiles. And that's why this funder won't be available in Scopus. However, our main priority in the funding domain is to provide more transparency to our customers into which funders are included in the products. And we are working with the various products to make this information available to our users. So while we try to keep as much as possible aligned, due to technicalities or requirements is not always possible. I hope that by now I was able to provide a more clear overview of the Elsevier funding data, and which is, as I said, a more generic database. And now I'll zoom into how is this being used in Scopus and why. And next slide, please. So focusing on researchers, I chose for today to focus on researchers and why are researchers using a Scopus or funding data available in Scopus, and also on funders. Why are funders using this information? To start with researchers, they are using Scopus to see which funding bodies allocate funds within their research areas of interest. And through the funding data on Scopus, we aim to help researchers inform their collaboration decisions, showcase their success, and inspire their grant proposals. When building collaborations, we learn from researchers that they are interested to discover possible collaborators who have received funding from a certain funder in the past. And now you can drive these insights looking at Scopus profiles, Scopus researcher profiles. Also, funding is acknowledged by researchers as an indication of success and also as an early indicator of what they are working on. And by pre-filling the grant's history on the researcher profiles, we are making it very easy for researchers to showcase their past funding. We are also making available on Scopus the information about the grants received. So basically the metadata, so researchers can read about the grants from others in their field who have obtained funding. And again, they can get inspiration on their grant submission strategies. Next slide, please. Also, as we are working with funders to make this data available, part of my work at Elsevier is to ensure that we also create value for funders. And through the insights about the outputs resulting from their projects, we help funders in their strategy setting or inform their strategy setting and demonstrating the impact of their funding. Through Scopus, we are connecting the publications with the funding, being either with the funder or even more granular when possible with the projects. We are creating more visibility on the outputs resulting from their funding, as Scopus is being used by millions of users around the world. If funders, it's also based on what I learned through my experience of working with funders, right? They have a very good and complete view when it comes to their awards data, right? Their past information. However, when it comes to funding outputs and outcomes, there's no single source of truth, right? So we are collaborating and helping funders to get a more complete picture of the impact of their funding, but also help create visibility on their contribution to the research. In the end, our goal at Elsevier is to create or at least our goal at funding domain at Elsevier, is to create a solid foundation of funding data to help the research ecosystem, right, and the research community by helping the researchers, the research institutions, and the funders. And with this, I'll pass it over to Elena so she can actually show you in practice what it actually means and how the funding data is present in Scopus.com.
Thank you, Andrea. I'll take it from here. Okay, so Andrea just provided an introduction and explained you where the data funding information coming from. And she also explained the main use cases we're trying to support in Scopus. So now I'm going to show you where you can find this information and how it works. So first of all, we'll zoom into how you can search data in Scopus. And before I show you how this can be done, I would like to highlight that we recently improved the searching capabilities of fund information in Scopus. This was done by introducing parent-child relationships, which gives a more complete view of all the research around the funder. So it is now possible to search by top-level funding body and get results, which includes publication, which come from sub-institutes that belong to this funder. So for instance, now on the screen, you see some results for 3 funders that we pre-selected. And for instance, if we look in the first row, the US Department of Health and Human Services, before we made this improvement, it was possible to find around 22,000 documents in Scopus. But now with the improvements made, it's almost 3 million documents that you can find. And the same holds for US Department of Transportation. We managed to increase the number of searchable records 3 times, and for US Department of Justice, it's actually around 2 times more. So let's take a look how you could search. So there are 2 possibilities how you can search in Scopus, and one is the basic search. If you come to the homepage, Scopus, www.scopus.com, there is an opportunity to search within. There is a drop-down menu which provides different options for searching. Specifically with regard to funding information, there are 4 options. You can search using funding number. This would be a grant, number of the grant or award. And by selecting the specific option and providing the number, the search engine will look into the documents in specific funding number field and pull all the records we have in Scopus that contain this funding number information. Funding acronym is about acronym of the funding sponsor, right? The sponsor who funded your grant. And funding sponsor is the name of the funding organization that funded the grant. And last but not least, funding information will have a combined search by looking into funding acknowledgements in the paper, but also all the other fields that I just mentioned. So if you see on the screen, I tried to search by selecting the option funding acronym and acronym NIH, and it pulls around 1 million document records from Scopus, which is now possible to fine-tune results even further by looking into children, right? Children of this NIH. For instance, you can zoom in and use the filter National Institution of Health, and this will result in around 900,000 records. So another approach that you could take is to use what we call advanced search. So it's again, if you come to the home page on Scopus, there is a link just below the same search within drop down. It's called advanced search. It will take you to a different screen, and there you can use the advanced search builder, or if you're more familiar with queries, you can type in queries yourself. Again, you can use very similar field codes fund all is equivalent of funding information. It will search for your string around all the records, looking into acknowledgements and related funding information fields in the metadata record. Fund-sponsor will search for a funding body based on the funder name. Fund-ACR will look into funding body acronym, and fund-NO will search for the grant information. So in this specific example, I used the query and searched for funding number. So I indicated two different grant numbers that I would like to search, and I used the operator OR. So it's different Boolean operators you can use. It could be OR, it could be AND, and the outcome is shown on the screen. So for this specific grants, so I asked for information that contains either one or another grant number. We got to 13,000 results. So moving on. So we just looked how we can search for funding information. But what actually about research that was sponsored by certain grants? How could you relate to the funding information by looking at the published research? More than 16 million articles in Scopus feature funding data. So this information either comes from funding acknowledgements that we retrieved from the articles, and it is enriched, as Andrea just described, with the funder information, which is publicly available. This information comes from sources, public sources such as UKRI or NIH Reporter. So you see on this screen a screenshot of the article page in Scopus. And if the article has funding information, in the left navigation panel, there will be a section. And if you click on it, it will scroll the article and the funding details section will appear. So what it will contain information about the funding sponsor, funding number of the project or the grant. And if the article contains information, for instance, in acknowledgements, it will appear in the funding text section. So just to give you a little bit of example, this is a publicly available website, and this is a grant which received sufficient funding, more than 1 million. It lasted for more than 4 years, and the funder was Medical Research Council. This is a UK funding organization, and here this is also the project reference or the grant number. So this project also generated quite some references, and I highlighted one of the references that I would like to show you how it will appear in Scopus. So let's take a look. So you see on top, it's exactly the same title of the article, and this article indeed contains the funding information with the exact matching. The name of the funder, Medical Research Council, and exactly the same project number. What you also see on the screen, there is a little link at the bottom which says see opportunities. So this links to our sister product, which is called Funding Institutional. And there you can actually click and go to the website and see if there are any grant applications open right now, which you could potentially be interested to submit. What is also useful to know that you can actually export funding information. So this is possible again from the article page, but also if you search and select multiple documents, it's exactly the same. So you see there's a button on top, which is called export, and it allows to export funding details such as number, acronym, sponsor, or funding text in the most popular file formats, such as CSV, text, research information system format, or BibTeX. So once you do the selection and define the file type where you want to export, in this metadata I just explained you, this exact metadata that you selected will also appear in the file. In this specific example, I created a CSV file, and all the funding text will appear as a separate field, but all other details such as project information, information about the actual funder will appear in the funding details cell. So for instance, if you would like to have some further analysis, you can export this information and check it later or keep it in your archive. Right, the last element that we have in Scopus that I would like to discuss with you right now, it's what we call awarded grants. It provides a sneak preview of the author history. So why do we think this is important? Awarded graphs can really give you an idea whether this researcher could be an interesting collaborator for you. First of all, because it also shows the history and the life cycle of this specific researcher. You probably will recognize this screen. Everything starts with idea, right? You have an idea, or maybe your professor has an idea that he or she wants research. This idea will then become a grant application with some collaborators. And once the grant gets funded, it will still take some time before the results are generated. And first, maybe you present it at the conference, then publish as a preprint, and only after some time it will appear in peer-reviewed journal. And first will start attracting views and downloads and media coverage. And only around 3 to 8 years after the beginning of the project, you will start receiving citations. And then later, the same citations also appear in patents and policy documents. So all this information we actually try to preserve and show on author profiles in Scopus. And you see that also recently we added awarded grants. So for instance, if researcher is a principal investigator or co-applicant of the grant, this information will appear on the profile of this specific researcher. And if you click on it, you can get some more details about this. First, the list of projects, and each and every project has a description. So we think it's an early signal. And for instance, if you're looking for collaborators, that's a good opportunity to find those people who already applied for grants and were very successful. This is still in the pilot stage. We're currently focusing on US awarded grants only, and this has been tested with a few partners, but we are looking into expanding it, and Andrea will say a few words soon how we plan to do that. So there's also some more information available. You can read about it, and obviously if something goes wrong and the owner of this profile finds the mistakes, they can submit a correction request, either do it themselves through author feedback wizard or through content support desk. And last but not least, all the information that you see there about grants are actually coming from the publicly available sources and the funders. And with that, I would like actually to give floor back to Andrea again, and she will say a few words of what's coming next.
Thank you, Elena. So I guess, as you could see, there have been already quite some developments in Scopus even more recently to improve basically the presence and the value of the funding data on Scopus.com. However, we are, not stopping here, and in the future, we are planning to bring more enhancements, both in, how the data is presented, but also in the quality and the coverage of the funding data in our products, specifically in Scopus.com. To give you, a couple of examples on what we are busy with now. So actually, it's myself and Elena. We are working to improve how the funding information is available on the Scopus, on the articles on Scopus. Elena showed that we already have this information, but we would like to, first of all, provide a better user experience. So we are going to redesign and have an improved design on how this information is seen. But also we are working to improve the quality and the coverage of the underlying data. And that's mostly with my team. We are planning going forward to surface the links to the funder, but also surface the links to the projects themselves, so to the grants themselves when we have this information available. And I'm particularly actually enthusiastic about this development, as connecting funding to outputs has been, I heard this as a main pain point several times from the research community. Next slide, please. In the same time, in the funding domain, as I said, we are putting a lot of effort to increase the coverage of the awards on the Scopus researcher profile. And I mentioned that last year we launched a beta version of this, mainly with funders, with the federal funders in the US. We are planning to expand that, adding new funders in the US, but also going forward, adding what we call like major funders globally. Then moving subsequently and adding funders in different regions, starting with Australia, New Zealand, Europe, and so on. Also, there is a continuous effort to improve the quality of the links, right? The quality of the data and the quality of our linking capabilities. And we are working on enhancing our machine learning capabilities to have a better extraction of the funding data, of the funders, of the grants. We are also combining that with multiple sources to create what we call a best view of the funding data. And also we are deploying new models to identify outliers, to eventually spot some problems into our funding data and speed up the corrective actions. And I guess while our machine learning capabilities are evolving and we are getting better at extracting the funding, funder, and grants information, I think also the researchers can contribute themselves quite a lot by having more clear and complete information, providing a more clear and complete information about the source of funding on their articles. Actually enabling our machines to improve the precision of the extracted information. With this, I would like to thank you for joining the webinar. I will let now Elena to talk a bit about how the information can be found, how we can find the information about Scopus. Elena.
Thank you, Andrea. So indeed, just to remind everybody that we have some very useful links that you can use to stay in touch. First of all, we have Scopus blog. It's blog.scopus.com. And I'm not sure if you guys know, but there is an opportunity to subscribe to the newsletter by providing your email address, and we'll inform you about new developments and updates in Scopus. Next to that, we also have InfoSite, which is elsevier.com/Scopus, and there you can find all the useful information about Scopus, about funding, about other integrations we have, but also Q&A section to learn how to use Scopus. And last but not least, we also have our own Twitter channel, which is twitterchannel.com/Scopus. And to stay in touch, please take a look at this channel or follow us on Twitter. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. And we would like to proceed to the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Elena and Andrea. That was very insightful. So I had to think very hard of any questions that the audience might have, and I couldn't think of any, but there are some questions. So I'm going to put that to you if you want to try to answer that. So there's a question from Isol. I'm also probably not pronouncing that correctly, asking if you can tell us if there's a contact person to provide information, to ask about funding research. It looks like a question, specific funding for academic research. So it seems like Iso is a PhD student who wants to know if he can use this information we shared today to find funding opportunities for PhD students. So I'm going to leave that over to you.
Yeah, I can try to answer that one. So, I mean, we don't have, let's say, a specifically contact person, but I think we have our Elsevier support channels that this question can be addressed to, or any other funding related question. To answer the question, so all our funding, it's about research funding. More specifically about funding opportunities, I think, myself and Lucia mentioned about funding institutional. So that's also a product of Elsevier, which has a database of about 23 to 25,000 active funding opportunities. I think relevant for the PhD students are what we call, so we have fellowships, basically as part of the database, so that could be interesting. And we have also research grants available of this database. So yes, we have an Elsevier funding opportunities database available through funding institutional. Lucia, I'm not sure if you can add anything on top of that.
Yes, no, I think that was a comprehensive answer. So maybe Isa, you can let us know if you are happy with that. Then Sarah is asking how much South African funding information is available on Scopus.
Okay, so it depends, right? So as we said, in funding in Scopus, you have what I call two main data sets or data types. So one, you have the awarded grants, so past awarded information on the researcher profiles. So on that level, I could say there's not much from Africa because we focus so far on US federal funders, but we are continuously adding new funders. So, in the upcoming, future, this will come. But when it comes to availability, so to the source of funding on articles, yes, we are covering African funders. I was checking, I think there are somewhere 15 to 20 funders available in our taxonomy at this moment. And even when Elena was presenting, actually one of the documents that she presented was an article which was funded by NRF, the National Research Foundation from South Africa. So on that level, there are multiple funders from Africa or from South Africa, which are available as source of funding for our articles in Scopus. Again, Elena and Lucia, if you want to add anything on top of it.
I think it's perfect. Thank you, Andrea.
Yeah, that was clear for me as well. And then Peter Lezeko is asking, firstly, yes, agreeing that it was a very insightful presentation, and also asking about funding in terms of, research areas in Africa. So what is the availability of funding information related to Africa?
So again,
I'm assuming talking about funders. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if we can, if I already partially answered this question. As I said, yes, we do have both funding information as funding opportunities, awarded grants, and outputs from African funders. We are sometimes limited by the availability of this data online. I have to say that the availability of African funders is not, that great. We are continuously working with funders and with the community to increase this coverage. And then also there are quite some funders as part of our taxonomy, right? It's just that we need to capture more and more their data.
Right, and the next question was about funding information in SciVal. So I can answer that question, but I would prefer if you answer that from your more detailed background.
Yeah. So yes, there is funding information on SciVal, and actually there are two places where funding information is available in SciVal. So historically, I think there is a number of about 20 to 30 funders, key global funders, that we have information, awarded grants information in SciVal, and that has been already available for, I think, more than 5 years. And even, more interesting, last year, SciVal launched SciVal Grants, which provides even more detailed funding information on a topic level, right? At this moment for SciVal Grants, we've been focusing on mainly North America funders, but similar to the Scopus story, we are continuously adding new funders, right? So we would like to keep as much as possible Scopus and SciVal aligned into expanding on the coverage going forward. Lucia, I'm not sure. That's yeah.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you, Andrea. Yes. Let me just, I think that was all the questions that we had in the Q&A. No, another one came in. Any college fund allocation categories or other?
I think this is more relevant to funding opportunities, if I understand properly the question. I don't think we covered that. So I think at some point we stopped focusing that much on scholarships, but it's from fellowships up. So I don't think we have available college level funding.
So I think we've covered all the questions in the Q&A. I saw a hand raised. Maybe Taneshri, can you give us an indication if there are any raised hands still?
Lucia, I'm just checking.
Right, thanks.
None at the moment, so they lowered their hand.
Right, so we have some more questions coming in. So a question, first a compliment, very informative session. Thank you very much. And then, do other systems link or harvest from your database? For instance, dimensions. Sorry, and then she adds link or harvest.
Yeah, I mean, about harvesting, I hope not. But I mean, for linking, so I guess in general, we are all trying to create a more comprehensive view. So dimensions, again, as I said, in terms of linking outputs to funding, there's no source of truth. Funders know something, Elsevier knows something, dimension knows something. So while we are not linking, I think we can just contribute to create a more comprehensive view. But similar dimensions is mostly following the same steps that we do. However, we have a clear advantage of the quality of the Scopus data.
Thanks, Andrea. Okay, no more questions in the Q&A. Any raised hands? It doesn't seem that way.
So I just hope we were very clear, Lucia. And
yes, that's what I thought, because I was listening with an ear to ask questions. So, and I thought you did a pretty good job in covering, the funding information from different perspectives. So I think we can actually conclude with that, because that is what I wanted to thank you for, is really giving us a very clear, very comprehensive view and insightful about how we can actually use and action the information, the funding information that we have access to. So because that, I think, would be the most important part, the practicality, of it. So thank you very much for that. We really appreciate that you have joined us. You are the guys that are developing these features for us, so it's great to hear from you directly. And with that, I think we're going to end the session now. And just to remind everyone that we have another section again next week, so please join us again, and we will be making this available as I have mentioned. So thanks, everyone. Thank you to the speakers and thank you to all the participants.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Goodbye.
good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.